So when I first had a look at different bits of research around the curriculum, the 8 Ways pedagogies, my beliefs, I found it pretty challenging to develop different practices that I could personally embed in my own classroom in the future. But after doing a little bit more research and further deeper thinking around the 8 Ways pedagogies by using the website that I found different examples of practices that I could personally use in a classroom for implementing those 8 Ways into the different key learning areas. The further I researched the 8 Ways pedagogies, the clearer that it came to me that it's very important to think deeper than just the surface of how can I implement Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives into my classroom. It's deeper than thinking, hang on a second, I could just read a book about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture. I think that to make a very culturally appropriate classroom, it means that we're taking risks as teachers. We may not be comfortable with what we're teaching, but we're giving it a go. I think that is super important. It's more important to give it a go and maybe make mistakes along the way rather than just completely ignoring the fact that it is something that it needs to be taught. And everyone needs to feel accepted. And like something that I found that I really value about the 8 Ways pedagogies is the fact that it's very individualized and that everything is so authentic about the different examples of how you can embed different cultures and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives into a classroom where everybody can feel like they're accepted. One of the examples that I read across that really caught my eye was that a teacher had used a boomerang as like the center of an assessment for science, so understanding the different so instead of talking about the aerodynamics of a plane or of how a ball is thrown through the air, the teacher has used a boomerang as the center of how does the boomerang work, where does it go, how does it come back, the push and the pull, and all the different like aspects that the Newton's laws have on this object. I found that really interesting because you wouldn't personally stop and think, yeah, I'm going to use that boomerang as the center of my assessment tasks. So it takes a deeper order of thinking to think, hang on a second, maybe I can use something a little bit different than what's written in the curriculum that still works, that I'm still getting the same point across. The children are still learning exactly what they need to get to that next level. But we're also thinking, hang on a second, is there a way that we can embed culturally appropriate practices into our classroom? Just elaborating a little bit more on the use of a boomerang during science or mathematics, I believe that using that as a very strong example of a resource that I would definitely embed in a classroom. I just believe that it is very explicit teaching and that it definitely aligns the curriculum for science and maths. It's got the 8 Ways pedagogy throughout completely. It's embedding the curriculum and it's relating to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, and teaching the science behind the boomerang can really open up to different learning outcomes, different learning opportunities, mainly for upper primary. I found myself thinking about how I would promote the importance of individuality and accepting each other and creating a classroom where everyone can be proud of their culture and their background. My links. So after I did some thinking about how I could picture myself being in a classroom and creating practices that align the curriculum, my beliefs, the 8 Ways pedagogies, different assessments, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, I found that personally it would be a big part of my classroom to incorporate a lot of critical reflection. So after every time I thought about a lesson or how I could create an assessment task, I was constantly finding myself backtracking to how did this work? Did it work? What if it didn't work? If it didn't work, then what can I do next time? So I think that it's very important for me to be able to to get the children in my classroom to understand that you're always going to make mistakes, that I'm a human, they're a human, and that I just think that it's very important for everyone to be able to work together as a team and to move forward. So as a teacher, I think it is very important to critically reflect on my practices in the classroom and how they're culturally appropriate for everyone, every individual student, and how I can always improve my practices. I've just pulled up at my friend's house and I'm about to go inside and have a chat with her mum. Her mum is an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander woman from Bundaberg. So there are 3 questions that I wanted to ask Maria to just spark conversation with her. The first question would be how her experience was as an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander mother and having a family going through primary school and what her experiences were within that setting. The second would be, I also would like to ask Maria what the main challenges were that she faced within a school setting. And the last would be how she suggests teachers could improve their practices to make primary school, the primary school experience for the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families more comfortable and the experience is a lot more positive. So I took a couple days to really reflect on the conversation that I had with Maria. There are a few points that I wanted to bring up, and when I asked her about her experience as an Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander mum, she responded in a very positive tone of voice, and she really opened up to me, I guess, with things that I'm not going to share right now, but things that definitely concerned me. But overall, she had a reasonably positive experience. The main point that she put across was the fact that there wasn't enough education in teachers around how to implement those practices for her children to individually respond to. So yes, her children are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. They identify, and their father is Caucasian, so he's Irish. And she found it quite difficult because the girls were growing up trying to figure out really who they were, but they weren't getting scaffolded any sort of education around how they can really express themselves and to find out exactly what part of their culture and how they're going to really research and learn and experience more around that. I continued to ask Maria what type of processes she thinks teachers and schools should go through to ensure that they are creating practices around cultural awareness that are appropriate for her children specifically. But she said that having teachers who are competent and confident around teaching anything to do with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives, really making everybody aware in an effective and appropriate way to communicate with parents, I believe, is an incredibly important part of being able to teach Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives throughout the school and the classroom. Just making sure that everyone's on the same page, really. Everyone is aware of what's going on in the classroom, so there aren't any, "Oh, I didn't know that you were teaching this" comments. And basically inviting everyone into the classroom as an open and really inclusive environment can create ways for parents to be able to reach out to teachers and to say, "Hey, why don't you do this? We could all work together and participate in whatever it is that they're wanting to participate in." That way that parents can feel a lot more comfortable with what their children are getting taught in the class. Really effective teachers have knowledge of their surroundings, basically, the history of the land in which they teach, and where they grow. And lastly, a really big point that she made that actually got me thinking was the encouragement of students to participate in different cultural events. So like anything local to do with the community, knowing the traditional owners of the land and really getting to know everybody in the community, all the elders,
getting everyone really involved in these practices to ensure that the children's safety and cultural awareness is their number one priority.